ready to dive into the world of hypnotism.
Sounds exciting.
Yeah, we've got quite a collection of sources here. Book excerpts, historical accounts, and even some scientific research.
Oh, wow.
I'm really excited to dig in and see what we can uncover.
Me too. I think a lot of people have this idea of hypnotism as this mind control superpower.
Yeah.
You know, like they show it in those old movies.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the things that we want to kind of unpack today.
Absolutely.
Is it really this mysterious force that can control people's minds? Or is there something more to it?
Right.
So I guess the best place to start would be with the basics.
Okay.
What is hypnosis?
Well,
I mean, really, is it some kind of artificial sleep? Like,
the term itself, hypnosis, does come from the Greek word for sleep,
oh, wow.
hypnos.
Interesting.
But the similarities pretty much end there.
Okay.
It was coined in 1841 by James Braid, a Scottish physician who was a real pioneer in making hypnotism more scientific.
So he was kind of one of the first people to really study it in a rigorous way.
Exactly.
So he was the one who kind of debunked the whole sleep thing, but the name just stuck around.
Yeah, pretty much. And he was actually building on the work of someone you might have heard of, Franz Mesmer.
Oh, Mesmer. Yeah, the guy behind mesmerism.
Right. Mesmer had this idea that there was this universal force called animal magnetism that could be used to heal people.
Yeah, I remember reading about that. He used magnets and all these kind of like strange techniques to try to influence this force. But it sounds a little out there, right?
Well, yeah, eventually his theories were debunked.
Okay.
But what's fascinating is that Braid, who initially actually started out following Mesmer's ideas, ended up pivoting and becoming a key figure in moving hypnosis toward a more scientific approach.
So he went from believing in animal magnetism to taking a more scientific approach.
Pretty much, yeah.
Wow, that's quite a shift. So if it's not sleep, what's really happening in the brain when someone's hypnotized?
You know, that's still a bit of a mystery.
Even with all the research.
Even with all the research. But we do know that certain brain regions show different activity patterns during hypnosis compared to normal consciousness.
Like, are there parts of the brain that actually shut down?
Not exactly shut down. It's more like some areas become less active while others ramp up.
Okay.
For example, there's a decrease in activity in the prefrontal cortex,
Okay.
the part of the brain that's involved in critical thinking and decision-making.
So is that why people are more open to suggestions under hypnosis, because their inner critic is kind of taking a break?
Could be, yeah.
But if you're under hypnosis, do you lose control of your actions? Like, can someone make you do something that you really don't want to do?
That's a big one, and it's a myth.
Oh.
You keep your free will and your sense of ethics. You're not going to do anything under hypnosis that you wouldn't do in a normal waking state.
So you're not going to, like, rob a bank or confess to a crime or anything like that?
Right, exactly.
Okay, that's good to know, especially if you're thinking about trying hypnotherapy. Okay, so let's move on to suggestibility.
Okay.
So, is it true that anyone can be hypnotized?
Well, it's more nuanced than that.
Okay.
While everybody is suggestible to some degree, you know,
Yeah.
think about how a catchy song can change your mood,
Oh, yeah.
right?
That's definitely true.
But not everyone is equally hypnotizable.
Okay.
It depends on personality traits, you know, how
Yeah.
open you are to the experience.
Yeah.
And even your past experiences can come into play.
So it's not like this superpower that somebody can just use on you against your will.
Right.
There has to be some kind of like willing participation.
Yeah, there has to be a willingness to be hypnotized.
Okay. So I guess suggestibility is kind of like a spectrum, right?
Yeah, you could think of it that way.
On one end, you have people who are easily influenced, very literal, maybe have vivid imaginations.
Right. They might be more hypnotizable.
Okay.
And then on the other end, you have those who are very analytical. They question everything, and maybe they're not as easily swept up in fantasy. So they might be less susceptible.
Okay, so where do you think most people fall on that spectrum?
Most people are somewhere in the middle.
Okay.
And it's important to remember that suggestibility isn't a weakness. It's actually a natural part of human interaction.
Okay, that makes me think about all those real-world examples of suggestibility. Like you said, music can energize you, advertising plays on our desires. But I'm curious about how suggestion actually works in hypnosis. Like, what's the mechanism there?
Well, there are a couple of different schools of thought on that.
Okay.
Some believe that suggestions primarily target the conscious mind.
Okay.
So the hypnotist might use direct instructions like, you will feel relaxed, or you will remember this event clearly.
So it's very straightforward.
Very straightforward.
Okay.
And then there's the school of thought that believes that suggestions work by tapping into the unconscious mind.
Hmm.
And in this case, the hypnotist might use metaphors or stories or guided imagery to indirectly influence your thoughts and feelings.
Okay, and what would that look like?
So let's say, for example, someone wants to overcome a fear of public speaking.
Okay.
Instead of giving them a direct command, the hypnotist might guide them through a visualization of them successfully delivering a speech and feeling confident and in control.
So it's more about like working with the subconscious to create lasting change.
Precisely.
Okay, that makes sense. And you mentioned the unconscious mind. That's another one of those terms that kind of gets thrown around a lot. Can you explain exactly what the unconscious and the subconscious mind are
Right.
and how they relate to hypnosis?
Well, those terms have a really interesting history.
Okay.
They were even pondered by philosophers like Friedrich Schelling and Samuel Taylor Coleridge.
Oh, wow.
But it was Sigmund Freud who really brought the concept of the unconscious to the forefront in the late 19th and early 20th centuries.
Freud, the father of psychoanalysis.
Right. He had a lot to say about the hidden workings of the mind. And psychoanalysis sees the unconscious as this reservoir of repressed thoughts, desires, and memories, things that we're not consciously aware of.
It's like that tip of the iceberg analogy, right? There's so much more beneath the surface.
That's a great way to visualize it.
Yeah.
And the idea is that these unconscious contents can actually influence our conscious thoughts and feelings and behaviors.
Wow. That's a little mind-blowing.
It is.
I know I've had dreams that felt like they were messages from my unconscious. Have you?
Yeah, definitely. You know, it makes you wonder how much of our lives is driven by forces that we're not even aware of.
That's a good question.
Right.
Okay, so now that we kind of have a better understanding of suggestibility in the unconscious, let's tackle some of those common myths.
Okay.
First up, people under hypnosis lose control of their actions and will reveal their deepest secrets.
Right.
Is there any truth to that?
Not a chance. As we discussed earlier, you retain your free will. No hypnotist can make you do something you really don't want to do, like cluck like a chicken.
Okay.
Or reveal some secret you're determined to keep.
That's a relief.
Yeah. Research actually suggests that people under hypnosis often prioritize the truth. They might be more open to exploring their feelings, but they're not going to blurt out things that they're not ready to share.
That makes sense. Maybe with that inner critic on mute, it's actually easier to access those true feelings.
Could be.
Okay, myth number 2. Hypnosis can be used to cause harm. What do you think about that?
Like any tool, hypnosis can be misused.
Okay.
But the practice itself isn't inherently dangerous.
Okay.
It's generally considered safe when it's used by a qualified and ethical professional.
And one of our sources mentions that therapeutic hypnosis can actually act as a bridge to the subconscious, which would hold valuable information for treating emotional issues.
Exactly. Hypnosis can be a powerful tool for healing and personal growth. It's not about mind control. It's about helping people tap into their own inner resources.
So it's more about empowerment than manipulation.
Exactly.
Okay, great. So we've busted a couple of big myths there. Now let's shift gears and talk about hypnotherapy.
Okay.
What exactly is hypnotherapy?
Well, essentially, hypnotherapy uses hypnosis in a therapeutic setting.
Okay.
So think of it as using hypnosis to address a range of emotional, psychological, or even physical issues.
Okay. Can you give us some examples of the kinds of issues that hypnotherapy can help with?
Well, it's shown promise in addressing things like anxiety, depression, insomnia,
Right.
phobias, PTSD, even chronic pain and addiction.
Wow, that's quite a range.
It is.
Is hypnotherapy considered a legitimate medical procedure?
Yes, it is. Organizations like the American Medical Association and the American Psychological Association recognize hypnotherapy as a legitimate medical procedure.
So it's not just some kind of fringe practice?
Not at all.
Okay.
There's a growing body of research supporting its effectiveness for a variety of conditions. And what's really interesting is this research is helping to solidify the scientific basis of hypnosis.
All right.
We're starting to understand how it impacts brain function, and that's really remarkable.
That is remarkable. Okay. So now I've heard of this thing called self-hypnosis. Is that something that anybody can learn?
Absolutely. Self-hypnosis is a skill anyone can develop with practice. And it can be incredibly empowering because you're in control of your own mental state.
Right. You're not relying on somebody else to guide you.
Exactly.
So it's like having a personal therapist in your pocket.
Yeah. What are some of the benefits of practicing self-hypnosis?
Okay, yeah. What are some of the things that people can use it for?
It can be used for a surprising range of things. boosting motivation, improving focus, managing stress, breaking bad habits, even enhancing creativity.
Wow, that's a lot.
It is.
So how do you actually do self-hypnosis?
Well, there are a ton of techniques, and it's really about finding what works for you. Some common methods include progressive relaxation,
Okay.
where you systematically tense and release your muscles.
Right, we talked about that earlier. And visualization.
Right, where you create these vivid mental images of yourself achieving your goals or experiencing a desired state.
So it's about harnessing the power of imagination.
Precisely.
Okay. And can anyone do these techniques?
Absolutely. Even something simple like focusing on a spot on the wall and repeating a calming phrase to yourself can be a good starting point.
So anyone can experiment with self-hypnosis,
Mm.
even if they've never tried hypnosis before.
Exactly. There are tons of resources out there to help you get started too, like guided audios, books, even apps.
Wow, it's a whole world.
It is.
Okay, so now I'm curious about the different ways that hypnosis is being used today.
Okay.
I mean, we know about hypnotherapy,
Mm.
but are there any other, like, surprising or intriguing applications?
Definitely.
Okay, what are some of them?
One area that's gaining traction is sports performance. Yeah, athletes are using hypnosis to improve their focus,
Wow.
reduce performance anxiety, and even boost their confidence.
So it's not just for mental health, it can actually impact physical performance.
Absolutely.
Wow, that's really interesting. What about forensic hypnosis? I've heard of that being used in criminal investigations.
Yes, forensic hypnosis is a field that aims to enhance memory recall in witnesses or victims of crimes. It's a bit controversial, though.
I bet. Is it effective?
The reliability of forensic hypnosis is definitely debated.
Okay.
There are concerns about the potential for false memories and suggestibility, which is a big deal when you're dealing with legal cases.
Yeah, you don't want to base a conviction on a faulty memory.
Exactly. So it's a technique that needs to be used with extreme caution.
Okay. What about pain management? Can hypnosis actually help with pain?
You know, there's actually a growing body of evidence suggesting that hypnosis can be effective in reducing pain, especially chronic pain.
Really?
Yeah.
That's fascinating. How does that work?
Well, it's not fully understood yet, but it seems that hypnosis might alter how the brain actually processes pain signals.
Wow.
It can also help people develop better coping mechanisms and manage stress, which can, make pain worse.
Right.
So it's a really multifaceted approach to pain management.
So it's not about, like, fooling yourself into thinking you're not in pain. It's actually changing the way your brain experiences the pain.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's really incredible. Okay, last question before we move on. I know a lot of people are curious about hypnosis for weight loss. What can you tell us about that?
It's important to be realistic here.
Okay.
Hypnosis isn't some magic solution for weight loss.
Okay. No overnight miracles?
No overnight miracles.
Okay.
But it can be a valuable tool when it's part of a comprehensive weight loss plan.
Okay.
That includes diet and exercise.
So how can it help?
Well, it can address the emotional and psychological factors that contribute to overeating.
Okay.
Stress, boredom, even emotional eating. Hypnosis can help people develop healthier coping mechanisms and build motivation for those lifestyle changes.
So it's about shifting those habits and mindsets for long-term success.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about some of the current applications of hypnosis. But let's take a little trip back in time.
Okay.
Can you give us a brief overview of how hypnosis has evolved throughout history?
Well, we've talked a bit about Franz Mesmer and his theory of animal magnetism back in the 18th century.
Right, the magnet guy.
Right.
But as we know, his theories were debunked.
They were. Benjamin Franklin was even on the commission that debunked his theories.
Wow, Ben Franklin was involved in hypnotism research.
He was.
That's amazing.
But even though Mesmer's theories were ultimately disproven, his work did spark a lot of interest in the power of suggestion and the mind-body connection. He was a trailblazer, even if he was on the wrong track.
So even though he was wrong, he played a role in paving the way for a more scientific understanding of hypnosis.
Exactly.
Okay, so after Mesmer, who are some of the key figures that kind of emerged?
Well, in the 19th century, you have James Braid, who we've talked about.
Right.
And you also have Jean-Martin Charcot,
Okay.
a prominent neurologist who used hypnosis to treat hysteria.
Hysteria. That's kind of an outdated term now, isn't it?
It is, but back then it referred to a wide array of psychological and physical symptoms that doctors couldn't explain.
So he was using hypnosis to treat what we might now consider like anxiety or depression.
Potentially, yeah.
Interesting.
And his work had a big impact.
Well,
One of his students was Sigmund Freud.
no way. So hypnosis was kind of a precursor to psychoanalysis.
In a way, yeah. Freud eventually moved away from hypnosis, but his early work with it definitely helped to shape his ideas about the unconscious mind.
That's fascinating.
It really is. It's interesting to see all those connections.
It is, yeah. So hypnosis has really come a long way from its early days. It's gone from animal magnetism to being studied using brain imaging techniques. It's amazing how much our understanding has evolved.
It really is. And the journey is far from over. There's still so much more to learn about this powerful tool and its potential to unlock the mysteries of the human mind.
Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, it really makes you wonder what other mysteries of the mind are out there just waiting to be uncovered.
Speaking of which, one of our sources mentions this intriguing concept. It's called cognitive penetrability of perception.
Oh, hi.
Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah, it's a bit of a mouthful.
It is.
But essentially it refers to how our thoughts and beliefs can actually influence how we see the world around us.
So it's not just our senses passively taking in information, our minds are actually shaping that information.
Exactly, yeah. It's like our brains are adding these filters to our perceptions based on our experiences, our expectations, our beliefs.
And some researchers believe that hypnosis can actually enhance this cognitive penetrability,
Right.
making people even more susceptible to suggestion. So, like, you could actually be led to believe something is true, even if it's not, because of the power of suggestion under hypnosis.
That's one possibility, yeah. So, for example, a hypnotist might suggest to someone that a lemon is actually a sweet orange,
Okay.
and they might actually perceive it as tasting sweet.
Wow, that's wild.
It is. It challenges our assumptions about what's real and what's not.
So it's not just about changing thoughts and feelings, but it's potentially altering our senses as well.
Potentially, yeah. It's a fascinating area of research. It really highlights how malleable our perceptions can be.
Our source even mentions that under hypnosis, people can experience sensations and events that would be considered impossible in the waking state. Like hallucinations.
Like hallucinations, yeah.
That's both intriguing and a little unsettling.
It is, but it's important to remember that these changes in perception aren't always intentional or even beneficial. Sometimes people under hypnosis might experience distortions or misinterpretations of reality, which is why it's so crucial to work with a qualified professional who understands those potential risks and benefits.
Right, you don't want to end up in a situation where your perception of reality is completely skewed.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, while we're on the topic of risks, one of the sources that we have talks about the potential for false memories being created during hypnosis. How real is that concern?
It's a valid concern
Okay.
because hypnosis can make people more open to suggestion. There's a possibility that they might create memories of events that never actually happened or embellish existing memories with false details.
So it's not quite like implanting a memory, but more like influencing the way memories are formed or recalled.
Right, exactly. The person might unconsciously fill in gaps in their memory or create new memories that feel real to them, but aren't actually accurate.
Okay. That's a bit scary, especially if you're thinking about using hypnosis for therapeutic purposes.
Right.
So how can people protect themselves from that happening?
It all comes down to working with a skilled and ethical therapist. They need to be experienced in navigating those nuances, avoiding leading questions, and making sure they're not influencing the person's memories in any way.
So it's all about the therapist's skill and ethics.
To a large extent, yeah. A responsible therapist will understand the power of suggestion and use it carefully and ethically. And this is particularly important when it comes to forensic hypnosis.
Right, because in legal cases, accuracy is absolutely crucial.
Right.
You wouldn't want someone convicted based on a false memory that was created under hypnosis.
Exactly. Forensic hypnosis has been used to try and help witnesses or victims remember details of a crime. But there's been a lot of debate about its reliability. There have even been cases where it's led to convictions that were later overturned.
Oh, wow.
Because of those concerns about false memories.
So it's a powerful tool that needs to be used responsibly and with a lot of caution.
Absolutely. It's a complex issue. And the potential for both benefits and risks needs to be carefully considered.
It's interesting. One of our sources mentions that even the United States Department of Justice has weighed in on forensic hypnosis.
They did.
Yeah.
And they acknowledged that it could be helpful in some cases, but they also highlighted some serious concerns about its use.
So even the DOJ is cautious about it.
It seems that way. They stress that any information obtained through hypnosis should be treated very carefully and might not be admissible in court due to those concerns about reliability. It's definitely a controversial technique.
That makes sense. You don't want to compromise justice by relying on potentially faulty evidence.
Exactly. It's a complex topic with no easy answers.
Okay. Now, switching gears a bit, you mentioned earlier that some people use devices called mind machines to help them get into a hypnotic state. Can you tell us more about those?
Sure. Mind machines use various techniques like flashing lights and pulsing sounds
to alter brainwave activity and create a relaxed, meditative state.
Interesting.
Some people describe it as like a high-tech meditation aid.
So are they actually effective?
There's some evidence suggesting they can help people relax and shift their brainwave patterns. But it's probably not the same as being hypnotized by a skilled professional.
Right. It's more like a way to explore different states of consciousness, but not necessarily a replacement for working with a trained hypnotist if you're seeking therapeutic benefits.
Right. It's probably best to stick with the experts if you're looking for real change or healing.
I agree.
Okay. Now, I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier. The different schools of thought within the world of hypnosis.
Right.
We talked about how some believe suggestions mainly target the conscious mind, while others focus on the unconscious. And you mentioned a few key figures associated with these different approaches.
Right.
You said James Braid, the pioneer we've been talking about, falls on the conscious mind side.
Exactly. And on the unconscious mind side, you have figures like, of course, Sigmund Freud and Pierre Janet.
Freud, we know. But who is Janet?
Pierre Janet was a French psychologist and neurologist who made significant contributions to our understanding of dissociation and trauma.
Now, those are some interesting concepts. Can you explain what dissociation is and how it relates to hypnosis?
Well, dissociation is essentially a psychological process where a person's thoughts, feelings, memories, or even their sense of self become disconnected from each other. It's like a fragmentation of the mind.
So it's like parts of your consciousness are splitting off.
That's a good way to put it. And it can be a coping mechanism for dealing with trauma or overwhelming stress. And some believe that hypnosis itself is a form of dissociation. The person's conscious mind is temporarily separated from their unconscious mind, allowing the hypnotist to access those deeper levels more directly.
That makes sense, especially when you consider that research has shown decreased activity in the prefrontal cortex during hypnosis, the area responsible for critical thinking.
Right.
It's like the conscious mind is taking a back seat.
Precisely.
So you've got these different schools of thought, different theories about how hypnosis works. But is there any consensus on which approach is like, right? That's a great question.
It is.
It's like asking which came first, the chicken or the egg.
Exactly. And honestly, there's no definitive answer. Hypnosis is such a complex phenomenon that we're still trying to unravel all its intricacies.
So it's still a bit of a mystery.
In many ways, yes. And I think that's part of what makes it so fascinating. It's the field that's constantly evolving, new discoveries and insights emerging all the time.
Definitely. Well, let's dive into some of the more nuanced aspects of hypnosis then. One of our sources mentions these post-hypnotic effects. What are those and how long do they last?
Well, post-hypnotic effects refer to the suggestions or behaviors that persist even after the hypnosis session has ended. It's like the hypnosis continues working even after you're no longer in that trance state.
So it's not just about what happens during the hypnosis itself, but the effects can linger.
They can, yeah. So let's say someone was given a suggestion during hypnosis to help them quit smoking. They might find that after the session, they have fewer cravings or maybe even a total aversion to cigarettes.
Wow, that's impressive.
It is.
So it's like planting a seed in the subconscious that keeps growing even after the session ends.
Exactly.
But how long do these post-hypnotic effects actually last?
It really varies.
Okay.
For some, it might just be a few hours. For others, it could be months or even years.
That's amazing. It really highlights the power of the subconscious mind.
It does.
Okay. Now, what about hypnotic trance?
Okay.
I mean, we've been talking about entering this trance state, but what exactly is it?
Well, as with many things in hypnosis, there isn't one universally agreed upon definition.
Okay.
Some describe it as a distinct state of consciousness, characterized by deep relaxation, focused attention and heightened suggestibility.
Mm.
It's like shifting into a different mode of being.
So you're not quite asleep, but you're not fully awake either.
Exactly. But then others believe that a hypnotic trance isn't some special state,
Okay.
but more like a variation of consciousness that we all experience to some degree.
Hmm.
Like those times when you're daydreaming, or
Okay.
you're totally absorbed in a book and you lose track of time.
Yeah, I've definitely experienced that.
Right. They argue that hypnosis simply amplifies these natural tendencies.
Hmm.
So regardless of how you define it, the key takeaway is that this trance state creates a mental environment where suggestions can more readily take root and influence thoughts and behaviors.
It's fascinating how much debate there is about the fundamentals of hypnosis,
Hmm.
even among experts.
It really is. And one of the theories that attempts to explain how hypnosis works is called mental dissociation theory.
Okay, I'm all ears. Break that down for us.
Okay, well, mental dissociation theory suggests that during hypnosis, different parts of the mind separate or dissociate from each other. It's like creating a split in consciousness.
So it's not just that your conscious mind quiets down, but it actually separates from other parts of your mind.
That's the idea. And this separation is what allows the hypnotist to communicate more directly with the unconscious mind, bypassing the critical filter of the conscious mind. It's like creating a direct line to the subconscious.
That's pretty mind-blowing.
It is. So who are some of the key figures associated with this theory?
Okay, yeah, who are the big names?
Well, the concept of dissociation was first systematically studied by Pierre Janet, who we talked about earlier,
Right.
but it was further developed by other researchers,
Okay.
including Ernest Hilgard.
And what was Hilgard's contribution?
Hilgard proposed something called neo-dissociation theory,
Okay.
which kind of expanded on Janet's ideas.
Hmm.
He suggested that there's a hidden observer part of the mind that remains aware even while the conscious mind is dissociated.
So it's like a part of you is always watching, even when you're in a trance.
Exactly. And this hidden observer can sometimes report on experiences that the conscious mind is completely unaware of.
Wow, that's pretty trippy.
It is.
So mental dissociation theory is basically saying that hypnosis is all about creating this separation between different aspects of the mind, allowing the unconscious to come to the forefront.
Yeah, that's a great summary.
Okay. Now I'm curious about how all of this translates into real-world applications.
Okay.
We talked earlier about how hypnosis can be used for things like pain management and addiction treatment. But how does that actually work? Well, in the case of pain management, one of the most intriguing findings is that hypnosis doesn't just mask the pain. Research suggests it can actually change how the brain processes those pain signals.
So it's not about like fooling yourself into thinking you're not hurting. It's actually changing the way your brain experiences the pain.
That's right. Hypnosis can also be used to teach people techniques for dissociating from the pain, focusing their attention elsewhere,
Right.
or even reframing their experience of the pain in a more positive way.
It's a multi-pronged approach.
That's fascinating. It's not just wishful thinking.
Right.
It's about using the power of the mind to create real change in the body.
Exactly.
What about addiction treatment? How can hypnosis help people break those deeply ingrained habits? Well, hypnosis can be really effective in addressing the underlying psychological and emotional factors that contribute to addiction. Instead of just focusing on willpower, which can be a struggle,
Right.
it helps people uncover and address those root causes.
So it's about getting to the source of the problem, not just treating the symptoms.
Exactly. Hypnosis can help people identify their triggers, develop healthier coping mechanisms, and even reprogram those subconscious beliefs and behaviors that might be fueling the addiction.
It's like rewiring the brain to create new, healthier patterns.
That's powerful.
It is.
But would you say that hypnosis is like a standalone solution for addiction? Or is it more effective when it's combined with other approaches?
It's definitely most effective as part of a comprehensive treatment plan.
Okay.
You know, therapy, support groups, lifestyle changes. These can all work together with hypnosis to support long-term recovery.
It's about creating a holistic approach to healing and transformation.
Now, one of our sources mentions a specific type of hypnosis. It's called erotic hypnosis.
Okay.
Can you shed some light on that? Erotic hypnosis is the use of hypnosis in a sexual context.
Okay.
It can be used to enhance sexual pleasure, explore fantasies, or even address sexual issues or dysfunctions. So it's a way to expand sexual horizons and explore different aspects of intimacy.
That's one way to think about it. But it's crucial to emphasize that erotic hypnosis should only be practiced with full consent.
Right.
And in a safe and responsible manner.
Absolutely. Safety and consent are paramount, just as with any other form of sexual activity.
Speaking of which, let's talk about the ethics of hypnosis in general.
Okay.
I mean, we've mentioned some potential risks, like false memories, but are there any, broader ethical considerations that come into play?
Absolutely. Hypnotists have a responsibility to be ethical and responsible in their practice. Respecting the client's autonomy and free will is paramount. You should never manipulate someone into doing something they don't want to do under hypnosis.
So it's about empowering the individual, not controlling them.
Exactly. And confidentiality is crucial, just like in any other therapeutic relationship.
Right.
The client needs to feel safe and trust that their privacy will be respected.
So it's about creating a safe, ethical, and empowering environment for exploration and healing.
Precisely. And part of that involves transparency. Hypnotists should be open about their methods, explain what they're doing, and obtain informed consent from their clients before proceeding with any hypnotic techniques.
So the client needs to know what they're getting into and have the freedom to say no at any point.
Absolutely. And just as important, hypnotists need to be aware of their own limitations. If a client's issues are beyond their expertise, they should refer them to another qualified professional.
So it's about knowing your boundaries and acting in the best interest of the client.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. Now let's shift gears for a moment and talk about some of the scientific research that's being done on hypnosis. I understand that neuroimaging is playing a big role in helping us understand what's actually happening in the brain during hypnosis.
It is. Neuroimaging is giving us this amazing window into how hypnosis alters brain function and how it can be used to influence thoughts, feelings, and even behaviors.
So scientists can actually see what's happening in the brain in real time during hypnosis.
Exactly. And the findings are fascinating. We talked about how studies have shown decreased activity in the prefrontal cortex during hypnosis.
Right, like the inner critic is taking a break.
Precisely.
Yeah.
But what's even more intriguing is that studies are also showing increased activity in areas of the brain that are linked to imagination, emotion, and sensory processing.
That makes sense considering some of the effects we've been discussing, like those altered sensory perceptions and hallucinations.
Exactly. So this research is really helping to validate hypnosis, taking it from the realm of mystery and grounding it in science.
Yeah. It's not just some mystical force. There's a scientific basis to it.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so exciting to study. We're constantly learning more about how hypnosis works and its potential applications.
Definitely. One thing that really struck me while going through these sources is how important the relationship between the hypnotist and the subject seems to be. It sounds like trust and rapport are absolutely crucial for hypnosis to be effective.
Absolutely. Hypnosis is a collaborative process. It's not something you can force on someone.
Right.
The subject needs to be open to the experience, have a certain level of trust in the hypnotist, and feel safe and comfortable.
So it's more about creating a partnership than a power dynamic.
That's a great way to put it, yeah. The more in sync those two minds are, the more likely the hypnosis is to be successful.
Now, one of our sources mentions a technique that involves passes. Can you explain what hypnotic passes are?
Okay.
And whether they actually have an effect?
Well, hypnotic passes are hand movements that the hypnotist makes in front of the subject's face or body. Think of it like a physical gesture.
That help focus the subject's attention and guide them into a relaxed state.
So are they essential for inducing hypnosis?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Many hypnotists use verbal techniques alone.
Okay.
But some people find that the passes add a visual element that enhances the experience.
Like creating a sense of ritual or ceremony that deepens the suggestibility?
That's a good way to think about it, yeah. Some believe that the passes have a physiological effect, while others see them more as a symbolic gesture. It's probably a bit of both.
It's interesting how even the basic techniques of hypnosis can be open to interpretation.
It is. There's still so much we're learning about this complex field.
Definitely. Speaking of learning, I'm curious about what makes someone more or less susceptible to hypnosis.
Okay.
Is it just about personality, or are there other factors involved?
Suggestibility definitely plays a role. People who are more easily influenced by suggestions
Okay.
tend to be more hypnotizable.
But other factors like imagination, focus,
Right.
even past experiences can all influence susceptibility.
So if you're the type of person who can easily get lost in a good book or movie, you might be more receptive to hypnosis.
Potentially, yes. Those who can easily immerse themselves in imaginary worlds tend to have an easier time entering that hypnotic state.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, one of our sources mentions a technique that involves eye fixation.
Okay.
What's that all about?
Well, eye fixation is a technique where the subject focuses their gaze on a specific object, often something small and shiny,
Right.
like a pendulum or a crystal.
Okay, so you're staring intently at something. Does that really help induce hypnosis?
It can.
Oh, yeah.
Focusing on a single point can help reduce distractions.
Yep.
It can tire the eye muscles and create a sense of relaxation and mental stillness, which can then make it easier to enter a hypnotic trance.
Interesting. It's like using a visual anchor to help shift your mental state.
That's a good analogy. And it's just one of many techniques that hypnotists use to guide people into that receptive state.
One of our sources talks about using hypnosis to address psychosomatic conditions. Can you explain what those are and how hypnosis can be helpful?
Well, psychosomatic conditions are physical symptoms
Okay.
that are caused or aggravated by psychological factors,
Okay.
such as stress, anxiety, or unresolved emotional issues. It's like that mind-body connection in action.
So it's like your emotional state is manifesting as a physical ailment. That's fascinating, but also a little scary.
It can be. But hypnosis can be a powerful tool for addressing these conditions because it can help people relax, reduce stress, and even access and process those bottled up emotions that might be contributing to the symptoms.
It's about getting to the root of the problem,
Exactly.
not just masking the symptoms.
Right.
Okay, before we wrap up, there's one term I wanted to ask you about. It's called electrobiology.
Electrobiology.
Yeah, it sounds pretty futuristic,
It does.
but one of our sources mentioned it in the context of early hypnosis research. What exactly is electrobiology?
Electrobiology is a term that's not really used anymore.
Okay.
But back in the mid-19th century, it was used to describe a type of hypnosis that focused on the role of electricity in the body.
Electricity. That sounds a little shocking.
I know, right? But remember, this was a time when people were just starting to understand the role of electricity in physiology. Proponents of electrobiology believed that they could induce hypnotic states by manipulating the body's electrical currents.
Wow. So it's a very physical approach to hypnosis.
Exactly. It was one of many attempts to explain this mysterious phenomenon. And while the term has fallen out of favor, it's a fascinating glimpse into the history of hypnosis research.
It's amazing to see how far we've come in understanding the brain and the power of the mind.
It really is. And one final technique I wanted to mention is autogenic training.
Okay, what's that all about?
Autogenic training is a relaxation technique that was developed in the early 20th century by a German psychiatrist. It involves a series of mental exercises that focus on inducing physical sensations like warmth, heaviness, and relaxation.
So you're essentially using your mind to influence your body's responses.
Exactly. It's been shown to be effective in reducing stress, managing anxiety, and even alleviating chronic pain.
And how does it relate to hypnosis?
Well, some consider autogenic training a form of self-hypnosis because it involves using mental suggestions to induce those physical changes.
So it's like a self-guided journey into relaxation and healing.
That's a great way to put it. It's amazing to think about all the different paths there are to accessing these deeper states of consciousness and healing.
It is.
Yeah. It really highlights the incredible power of the mind.
Yeah, it really is amazing.
It is.
Okay, so I think we've gone through a lot of the techniques and applications of the history of hypnotism.
Yeah.
But I think there's one big question that we haven't really addressed head on.
Okay.
And that's, is hypnosis really real? Or is it all just smoke and mirrors?
That's a good question. And it's one that comes up a lot.
Yeah.
You know, there are definitely skeptics out there who think it's all just a placebo effect or people just pretending to be hypnotized.
Right, the whole mind over matter argument. But even if it is a placebo effect, wouldn't that still make it a powerful tool?
That's a great point.
Yeah.
The placebo effect is fascinating in its own right.
Mm.
It shows just how powerful our minds can be in influencing our physical and emotional states.
Mm-hmm.
And if harnessing that power can help people reduce pain, overcome fears, or create positive change, then I'd say that's pretty remarkable.
I agree, yeah. And one of our sources pointed out that even the most skeptical researchers acknowledge that hypnosis can produce real, measurable changes in the brain and body.
That's right. Studies using neuroimaging techniques have shown that hypnosis can alter brainwave activity, blood flow,
Wow.
even hormone levels.
It's not just people imagining things.
Right.
There are physiological changes happening.
Exactly. It's not just some mystical force. There's a scientific basis to it.
That's what makes it so exciting to study.
It does. We're constantly learning more about how hypnosis works and its potential applications.
Yeah. One thing that really struck me while we were going through these sources was how important the relationship between the hypnotist and the subject seems to be.
It is.
Yeah. It sounds like trust and rapport are absolutely crucial for hypnosis to be effective.
Absolutely. Hypnosis is a collaborative process. It's not something you can force on someone.
Okay.
The subject needs to be open to the experience, have a certain level of trust in the hypnotist, and feel safe and comfortable.
So it's more about creating a partnership than a power dynamic.
That's a great way to put it, yeah. The more in sync those two minds are, the more likely the hypnosis is to be successful.
Makes sense. Now, one of our sources mentions a technique that involves passes. Can you explain what hypnotic passes are?
Yeah.
And whether they actually have any effect?
Well, hypnotic passes are hand movements that the hypnotist makes in front of the subject's face or body.
Okay.
Think of it like a physical gesture to help focus the subject's attention and guide them into a relaxed state.
So are they like essential for inducing hypnosis?
Not necessarily. Many hypnotists use verbal techniques alone.
Okay.
But some people find that the passes add a visual element that enhances the experience. It's almost like creating a sense of ritual or ceremony that deepens the suggestibility.
Interesting.
Some believe that the passes have a physiological effect,
Okay.
while others see them more as a symbolic gesture. It's probably a bit of both.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's interesting how even the basic techniques of hypnosis
Yeah.
can be open to interpretation.
It is, yeah. There's still so much we're learning about this complex field.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
I feel like we've explored the science, the history, the myths, the techniques, the ethical considerations. It's been quite a deep dive.
It has. And hopefully our listeners now have a better understanding of this fascinating and often misunderstood field.
I agree, yeah. Hypnosis is clearly a powerful tool.
It is.
And like any powerful tool, it's important to use it responsibly and with respect.
I couldn't agree more. Whether you're considering hypnotherapy, intrigued by self-hypnosis, or just fascinated by the power of the mind, we encourage you to keep exploring and keep asking questions. You might be surprised by what you discover.
Great advice. Well, thanks for joining us on this journey into the world of hypnotism.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. We'll be back next week with a whole new topic to explore.
Looking forward to it.
Until then, keep that curiosity alive.